Attention, please. My name is Susan Winkelstein. I'm a funeral director with Chicago Jewish Funerals. We're about to begin the services for Mr. Richard D. Triffler. The service will be officiated by Rabbi Jeffrey Weil from Ezra Habanim, the Niles Township Jewish Congregation in Skokie.
Adonai ma Adam v'teda ehu, ben enosh v'techashvehu. Adam lehevel dama. Yamav ketzel over, v'boke yatzitz v'chalaf, v'erev yimolel v'yavesh. Tashev enosh adaka v'tomer shuvu v'nei Adam. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, O eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you would even be mindful of us? We are all of us just a breath, our days a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu v'nei Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise, and that we understood whither we go from here, for when we die, we carry nothing with us, not our riches, not our glory. But we say, Shmor Tam Ur Yashar. Mark the wholehearted, behold the upright. Those are the ones who shall find shalom, who shall find peace. Friends, sadly we gather today on this beautiful day, but for a sad occasion, to remember someone who was Tam V'Yashar. He was wholehearted, he was upright, he was decent, he was fun and funny, irreverent, a little silly at times, loving. Richard Triffler. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ve'atzat risha'im u'v'derech hata'im lo amad u'v'moshav leitzim lo yashav ki im b'torat Adonai chavtzo u'v'torata yihageh yumam v'layla v'haya ke'et shatul al pagemayim asher piryo yitain v'ito v'alehu lo ibol v'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the holy teaching and the holy way of life is their delight and their path. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water. It yields its fruit in season. Its foliage never fades. Its fruit always flourishes. Please find the 23rd Psalm in our handouts, the inside. As we read together, The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. At this point, I ask the three mourners, Faye and Michael and Laura, to do the act, the mitzvah of the tearing, kriya. You have the ribbons on your garments. You repeat after me this blessing, which acknowledges God as the judge of truth, even when we might challenge that idea. And after you say the blessing, you can tear the ribbon usually upwards. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha-emet. Amen. Blessed are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, the judge of truth. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Amen. The third chapter of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. L'kol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashemayim. Et laledet ve'et lamut. Et lata'at ve'et la'akor natua. Et lifrot ve'et livnot. 8 livkot ve8 lishchok, 8 svod ve8 rokod, 8 lahashlich avanim ve8 knos avanim, 8 lachavok ve8 lirchok mechabek, 8 levakesh ve8 leabed, 8 lishmor ve8 lahashlich, 8 lirkoa ve8 litpor, 8 lachashot ve8 lidaber. For everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones, a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from our embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear, a time to sow, a time for silence and a time to speak. And so we take this moment to speak an appropriate time to speak words in memory of Richard Triffler. It is sad thinking that we gathered here at this very spot 7 years ago. I believe it was May 2013, and we considered a life. We considered how full Esther Triffler's life was, and it is sad and frankly surprising to gather again at this spot to consider Richard's life these 7 years later. But you always try to find some reason, some meaning for things that sometimes defy explanation. But 7, after these 7 years have passed, is an important number actually in Jewish tradition. It is a number of wholeness. It is the completion of a cycle. 7 days of the week, 7 years we often count, 7 weeks we often count. And so the 7 years since Esther's death are in a sense a completion of a cycle, one complete cycle. Richard was heartbroken with her passing. It's as if something deep inside him said, okay, I've done a full cycle, one full 7-year cycle since I lost Esther. I've completed that. And now, my time. And so we now consider him. He is worthy of consideration. Richard was a very decent human being. He was funny. Yes, he could be a little goofy, a little irreverent. He was kind. He was sweet. He loved family. He was devoted to his friends. He worked hard. He laughed. He had a lovely smile. He made others smile and laugh. And he was the kind of person, and honestly, there aren't too many of those out there, truly, who just kind of draw people to them, who people like being around. The kind of person that people like talking to. I did. I certainly did. There was something about Richard Triffler's vibe that just felt good. His smile, the tone of his voice, his sincere expression of interest in my own life and family. There's something about him. I met him. I remember when we met, it was just a month or so before Esther died. He had come to our evening minyan at the synagogue to say Kaddish for a family member. And he thought it was beshert, actually, that we got to know each other then, shortly before Esther died, so we wouldn't have to start from scratch at that sad time when she did pass away. Over the last several years, truly one of the people in my congregation that I enjoyed most schmoozing with, whether it was on the phone or getting together, was Richard. He was Chicago-born, son to loving people, loving parents, Annette and Eddie, older brother to Faye. They lived in Rogers Park, it's where he grew up. He graduated from Senn. He went on to University of Illinois, downstate, Champaign-Urbana. He then received a master's degree as well. Early on, he was a teacher. I would think that he would be a very good teacher. I think I would have liked to have had him as a teacher. But it was not for him, ultimately. Richard and Esther had known each other for a few years, and they dated, but I hear it was sort of an on and off sort of thing. But when it was finally on, it was on. They married at that time relatively late 20s, I think early 30s perhaps. Shortly after marriage, in the late 1970s, they moved to Israel for a few years. Michael was born in Israel. And a few years later, they returned to Chicago. Laura came along, the family completes. They established themselves in the community, getting to work, raising family. For a few years, Richard worked at the American Jewish Committee, something he and I shared in common. But he really hit his stride with bingo. He landed a job as a manager of a bingo hall in the city. In that bingo hall was a concession stand. When the owners of that concession stand gave it up, retired or whatever, Richard thought it might be an opportunity for the family, an opportunity for Esther, and it was. She began managing the concession stand, and he the entire hall. Eventually, as everyone knows, the bingo hall went by the wayside, at least for Richard Triffler, but the Trifflers established a little empire of concession stands in Chicagoland. This was good for Richard, the concessions, for he was good talking to people, strangers, employees, whomever, and people, as I said, liked talking to him. When you're that sort of person, unpretentious, down-to-earth, friendly, people will want to talk to you. He would notice whoever it was. He would notice something about them. He'd see whatever it was, Laura said, like a tattoo, a necklace, whatever it might be, and he might ask a question and thereby draw them out, draw them in conversation. He was good at that. It was like effortless for him. Richard and Esther spent a lot of time working together. Michael and Laura would work at the concession stands too. Some of their friends worked there as well. Meanwhile, back home, they had a creative, fun, busy home on Kedvale. Their home was a place where friends would congregate. It certainly bore Esther's creative stamp in all sorts of ways. It was a comfortable, unpretentious place. It had has a bit of a hippie vibe to it with Esther's influence. And it was a place for gathering too. A place for family to gather, Faye and David, Helene. A place for friends to gather. Besides bearing the mark of Esther's creativity, it also, of course, bore the mark, perhaps the sounds as well, of Richard's interests, his sports memorabilia, especially anything maybe having to do with the Cubs. He also brought to the home and and family life a somewhat, and I'm not judging in any way, I admire this, a more lowbrow fare at times. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And he enjoyed, for instance, watching modern classics like Dumb and Dumber, that sort of thing. He liked jokes of all kinds, the appropriate kinds, the maybe not so appropriate kinds. Speaking of perfectly appropriate, but sometimes not seeming so, sometimes Richard and Esther would kiss in front of their children. They, at the time, certainly considered that to be gross and inappropriate, but really it demonstrated the true love that abided in their parents' marriage. Richard also enjoyed his friends, hanging out, playing softball, 16-inch, and then I imagined he would come home after work, whatever, after a game, after going to house sales and buying stuff, and he would, on nice days, sit in that peaceful backyard garden, Esther's place. Whenever we would speak, Richard and I, he was eager to report on me what Michael and Laura were up to. He was very proud to become the father-in-law to Avi. He was also pleased to know, and he would always go check it out as well, that Esther's art, 6 pieces depicting biblical scenes, adorn a wall in our chapel at the synagogue. I had consulted the eulogy that I had given for Esther these 7 years ago, and I concluded with a phrase by our sages, "Let there be mourning at the time of mourning, and let there be rejoicing at the time of rejoicing." And this is certainly a time of mourning. It is a time of sadness. But despite the suddenness of this news, despite the sadness of the moment, despite the lack that you will feel in your lives, despite the loss, no longer seeing him, talking to him in person or on the phone, visiting with him, having him here in our lives, despite all that, I hope that there can be some rejoicing as well in his memory. Some people, even in death, make you smile just thinking about who they were. And Richard Triffler was that kind of person. Zichrono livracha. May his memory be for blessing. Amen. Michael?
Thank you, Rabbi. Well said. Okay. One word I think of when it comes to my dad is interesting. He was funny and warm, and despite my mom being the artist, was the emotional one. He was interesting in that he was a broad thinker. He had great Larry David type life observations. He also had a talent for forming his own well thought out view on things most people simply say right or wrong to. My dad taught history for a while before I was born, and when I was little, he once explained to me his master's thesis. He essentially made the argument that we falsely idolize our American forefathers. I must have been about 12 years old, and my dad told me his perspective on our founding fathers, and that they were basically slave owners who refused to pay taxes. They are not heroes. Well, whether that was good for my similarly rebellious attitude at 12 years old is questionable. I loved how he encouraged me to think for myself. My dad was fun to be around and liked people. He enjoyed connecting with people and could always find something to relate about. It might have been something as simple as learning someone had vacationed in the same city as him. Ordinary tidbits about a person's life really fascinated him. He took pride in being a good boss and second father to many of the young people that worked for us. They wouldn't hire my troublemaker friends, but many of the 16-year-olds they hired 20 years ago are now doctors or lawyers or chefs. I remember in particular him telling me just a few years ago that a group of girls that worked for us back when had recently taken him out to dinner as a thank you for what he did for them as a boss. Things like that meant the world to him. While my mom was more the artist type who connected with people through things like art and gardening, my dad connected with people just for the sake of their personality and character. He will be remembered for these traits and all he did to make the lives of the people around him better.
Faye?
I think you're going to think we all got together and tried to say the same things, but Richard was so genuine that everybody is going to say he had the same traits. So Richard was warm, he was friendly, maybe too friendly, caring, fun-loving. You know, my dad used to call him a character. My uncle affectionately called him knucklehead. Some might say he was goofy or silly at times, and he was. But maybe a phrase that best describes him is what he used to use to describe people and events, and that was zany zonkers. He said it all the time. Anyway, whatever you called him, he just made you smile and laugh and want to be with him, and you always knew that he genuinely cared about you. His goofy side really came out with kids, my kids, his kids, especially his kids. And that's what made him a good teacher. He would tease them, he would just be silly, and he'd make them laugh. And he just truly was amazing with them. And his caring side really came out with how well he took care of my parents and took care of Esther. It was amazing to me how caring he really was. It's like with all his goofiness, he could pull it together and care for people. As a big brother, I'd have to say our relationship was a little complicated. Sometimes, especially when we were really young, he was my mortal enemy and sometimes just annoying. Like when he used to sit on me and tickle me mercilessly until I'd cry, or when he'd practice his four-legged grapevine and I'd think my leg was going to break. He would scare me during episodes of Twilight Zone, and he tormented me with this little Pluto thing he had that had a sharp tail, and he would come poke me in the middle of the night while I was falling asleep without any warning. And then he had numerous food fights with my friends. One was a nonpareil fight, one was an all-out fight where it took us hours to clean up the house before my parents got home. He lent me his little broken down Rambler that some people might remember he called Big Red, but he failed to tell me that the buttons and the gears would fall out and the car would stall in the intersection. Anyway, that was fun. He'd kick me out of my room so he could talk privately on the phone at night on my little pink princess phone. That was always a sight to see. And also, when the teachers, who he almost failed because of tardiness, would say to me, "Are you Richard Triffler's sister?" I was like, oh my God, maybe I should just say no. But more often, he was my ally and my protector. Like when I was at Stone School, and he was pretty high about being the captain of the patrol boys, and he would threaten to report anybody or beat anybody up who gave me trouble in the neighborhood. When he was an usher at the Northtown Theater, he used to get me in for free and get his friends to give me free popcorn. He let me tag along with him and his friends to see Simon and Garfunkel. We had third row seats before they were even famous. He came in from Champaign to go with me to the Chicago Moratorium when my parents wouldn't let us go to Washington, D.C. Went to the Democratic Convention with me. We both stood about 6 feet from McGovern, and neither one of us, we were both too chicken to say hello, and we kidded each other about that for years. And he would listen to me vent and complain about what I'm sure were just trivial matters while I was in college and in years beyond. And he would give me advice, and occasionally I would follow it. But always he was my big brother who called me kid, and for some inexplicable reason, I called him kid too. While we rarely told each other we loved each other, I know I loved him, and I hope he knew. I hope he knew that, and I believe he loved me. Maybe that's what we were really saying to each other each time we said, "Hi, kid. Kid, I hope you find some peace wherever you are, and that you actually get to be with Esther, Mom, and Dad, and say hello for me. All I know for sure is that I will truly miss you, and I will miss you hear you saying, 'Hi, kid. I love you.'" Sorry for crying.
Laura.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone for your words. First, I want to say thank you to everyone here and for everyone who's watching in Zoom. It's a new world and a little different than the last time, but we'll make it through. The outpouring of love and support we have received in the last week has been amazing and reminds me of how much my dad meant to so many people. As some of you know, I'm truly my father's daughter. Throughout life, we would both laugh at the same things, make the same jokes, and given any specific situation, we almost always analyzed it the same way and usually knew exactly what each other was thinking. Sometimes he would even say how creepy it was, how alike we were. I think the only disagreement we consistently had was about who was funnier. Clearly, I think we all know the answer. But still, when one of us made a joke, instantly the person would comment on how funny they were, and the debate between us about who was funniest would begin. For all of those who knew my dad, you knew he was unique and one of a kind. He was quirky, silly, goofy, but he was also kind, caring, and loving. All my life, I can remember the tendency my dad had to talk and befriend anyone. Growing up, this was a very annoying and embarrassing quality for me, but through the years, I have learned to appreciate this more. My dad had this one theory that anyone who grew up in Skokie held a pencil incorrectly. Not sure how he made this theory, but he did. Whenever we went to a restaurant or a store, or he saw someone writing and holding their pencil incorrectly, he would always make sure, he would ask them if they were from Skokie. Usually they were not, but this always started a conversation. It usually got him talking to the person, and the conversation would lead to various places. He always made sure to talk and connect to every person he came in contact with. He had a way of making people feel at ease and able to talk to him about whatever. I believe part of it was because he had absolutely no ego, no pretentiousness, and was very laid back. I know there were so many people he connected to, whether they were the tellers at the bank he saw every day, or the people who came to do work on the house, or his many employees at the concession stands through the years. He had a way of making people his friends and building long-term relationships. Still to this day, as my brother had mentioned, he would tell me of ex-employees who would contact him and how much it meant to him. I know so many of them felt so close to him and kept relationships with him years beyond. My dad had many hobbies. One of his favorite things later in life was playing 16-inch softball with the Skokie Slugs. I remember he so looked forward to going every Sunday, and he would come home afterwards, and he would wrap numerous ice packs all over him, sit on the couch, and moan in pain. He would then tell me and my mom about all the plays he made, or the great hits he had. He loved to give a play-by-play reenactment, and on certain days he would tell us he was the star. You wouldn't believe what I did today. And he had so much pride and joy telling us. In addition to softball, my dad was an avid collector. His house is full of memorabilia and collectibles. He loved going to estate sales and house sales to add to his collections of buttons, baseballs, hats, many different things. Anywhere we would go on the weekend, he somehow always found a nearby sale to drag us to. But he didn't just hoard. He would buy things that he thought people would like. He often would buy an item with a specific person in mind. I'm sure many of you have an item that my dad got for you, whether you wanted it or not, because he was always thinking of others. Even when people came to the house, if they or their children showed interest in something, he would tell you, just go ahead and take it. Because no matter how valuable it might have been, he would rather have someone enjoy something than just have it sit at his house. While the passing of my dad was somewhat sudden and unexpected, he had knowingly struggled since the passing of my mom. When my mom passed 7 years ago, it was devastating for my dad. He never was fully able to come back from this. She was his soulmate, and without her, life was much harder. At my mom's funeral, I spoke about hoping that one day I could find someone who loved me half as much as my mom loved my dad. The one thing I'm so happy about was that my dad was able to see me find this love and was there 8 months ago to walk me down the aisle. This is the best gift he will ever give to me. Unlike many people, my dad was actually very open with his feelings. He would always tell me how my brother and I were his biggest accomplishment and how he was so proud of us and the way we had grown up. In fact, the last phone call from my dad was him randomly calling me just to tell me he loved me and how much he loved Avi and how proud he was of us. Even still today, when something happens and I think I have to call and tell my dad, it will eventually set in that I will no longer be able to pick up the phone and hear him tell me a crazy story. It usually started with his story that could only have happened to him. There are no words to explain the pain, but I know he is now back with his love.
לידה היא ראשית, ופטירה תכלית החיים כמסהם, כהליכה, כצמיחה, משלב לשלב. Birth is a beginning, death a destination, life is a journey, a going and a growing from stage to stage. And sadly, the life journey of Richard Triffler has come to its conclusion. We continue with El Molei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Molei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Rakiyam Asirim, Et Nishmat Yerachmeel ben Yehuda v'Chanaleah Shahalach le'olamo Baal harachamim yastirehu b'seter kenafav le'olamim V'yitzur b'tzur ha'chaim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, Eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence with the holy and the pure who glow like the light of the heavens to Richard Triffler, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence and within the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. Lord. We put soil from the land of Israel, from Har Zaitim, the Mount of Olives, in Jerusalem, into the grave of a Jew. It expresses the eternal Jewish hope in a better future for all of humanity. Al Mikomo Yavo B'Shalom. May Richard Triffler come to his eternal home in peace. Amen. Thank you. After Mourner's Kaddish, we will, they're doing the, they can do it? Okay. There's a way to place soil in the earth, 3 measurefuls of soil into the grave as is customary, acknowledging the reality of the moment. You should find Mourner's Kaddish on your handouts. Oh God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which this loss inflicts is the measure of a love that is stronger than death. Though we cry, may we also be like children who know that their parent, their ultimate parent, you, O God, is near, and who cling unafraid to your trusted hand. In the Spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us into your keeping, as we now repeat the words, hallowed by generations, Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah. Ve'alma divra chirate v'amlich machute. V'chayechon u'yomechon u'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mivarach la'alam u'lamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar, v'yit daleh, v'yit halal, shemei d'kudashah, barichu. V'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran be'alma v'maru. Amen. Yehei shlam marab amin shmayim. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen. I'd like now all the family and friends, supporters of the mourners to repeat these words, speaking to Michael and Laura and Faye, the 3 official halachic mourners according to Jewish law, to speak these words to them, repeating after me. May God console you with all who mourn in Zion and Jerusalem. Hamakom yinechem etchem v'tok sha'av le'tzion v'Yerushalayim. Now go forth in peace unto life. The family can come forward now to place, yes.
The Triffler family will be observing Shiva for the full week. To schedule a Shiva visit, please visit Chicago Jewish Funerals website to schedule a time and a day. Thank you.